Love the guy or hate the guy, there is no denying that Sid made an impact in the land of professional wrestling. His presence and his intimidating look was a promoter's dream back in the 90s. From 3 runs in WCW and 2 runs in the WWE, along with stints in ECW and USWA, Sid was able to go into main event spots wherever he worked, and also he made sure to command a big price tag to promoters who wanted his services. Sid's career isn't typical at all. Lots of decisions made by Sid were based around money and not necessarily how he would be booked. He didn't have the same passion for pro wrestling as others did, as he would frequently take himself out of the game to partake in his real passion, which was softball. He would also become difficult to work with, leading to some remarkable stories that have become legendary within the wrestling business. So without further ado, let's get started as we look at the wrestling career of Sycho Sid. Sid was born on December 16th, 1960 in Arkansas. He worked on a farm growing up, and as he got older, he realised he had a knack for sports. In regards to how he broke into the wrestling business, there are conflicting stories. Sid himself has said that Randy Savage approached him in a gym and asked if he had ever thought of getting into the business, and the rest is history. Lenny Poffo, on the other hand, has said that he bumped into Sid outside a wrestling show in Memphis, and Sid approached him asking how to get into the business. Poffo told Sid to wear a tight shirt, come back next week, and wait for Jerry Jarrett or Jerry Lawler to walk by. Lanny said that Sid looked like money, and Lawler and Jarrett would see the same thing once they laid eyes on Sid. What's interesting about these conflicting stories is that the two scenarios show Sid in a very different light. Sid's account shows that he was approached by someone else to become a wrestler, and Lenny Poffo's story suggests that Sid himself was quite desperate to become a wrestler. When recounting his version of events, Sid said, "My wife got pregnant and it sounded like I could get into that, making more a little bit faster, and that's exactly how it happened. I didn't have the story like a lot of guys do. I never had love for the business. It was really just to make money." Either way, Sid got trained and made his debut in a tag match where he teamed with Austin Idol to work against Nick Bockwinkel and Jerry the King Lawler. Sid then took the ring name of Lord Humongous. Sid went to Continental Championship Wrestling, working under a mask as Lord Humongous. From here, Sid also found work in New Japan Pro Wrestling and also World Class Championship Wrestling. It was in World Class that Sid began calling himself Sid Vicious, a tribute to the bass player from the Sex Pistols. Sid had gotten a good bit of experience and was signed to WCW in 1989, still using the Sid Vicious name. He formed a short-lived tag team with Dan Spivey, known as the Skyscrapers, but the team was short-lived. Sid suffered a broken rib and a punctured lung during a match with the Steiners at the November Clash of the Champions show, and he was replaced by Mean Mark Callis and the Skyscrapers. When he did eventually heal up, Sid was introduced as the newest member of the Four Horsemen in mid-1990. He was billed as the muscle of the group, but his first televised match back from injury sure didn't make him seem strong. At Clash of the Champions 11, Sid was defeated in 26 seconds by Lex Luger. Sid has since said that this was a punishment from Booker Ollie Anderson, who had gotten word that Sid was seen playing softball while rehabbing his injury. This wouldn't be the first time Sid was seen playing softball while still holding a wrestling contract either. While still a member of the Four Horsemen, Sid began a feud with NWA champion Sting, and the two were booked into a match at Halloween Havoc 1990. A fake Sting, played by Barry Windham, let Sid pin him in order for Sid to win the belt. The plan fell apart though when the real Sting came to the ring and beat Sid to retain his title. Sid then worked as a tweener for a little while following Halloween Havoc. After his match at Clash 13, he was attacked by Curtis Hughes, working here as the Big Cat, which prompted a short-lived reunion of the Skyscrapers tag team at Starrcade 1990. After the match, Sid resumed his duties with the Four Horsemen. After the Horsemen split up in April 91, Sid began negotiating with the WWF. Sid had the choice to sign a contract with WWF or WCW in 1991. Dusty Rhodes was coming in to be the booker for WCW at the time, and he wanted Sid to be a big attraction. Dusty wanted Sid to get a new deal signed with WCW prior to receiving a main event push that would catapult him into superstardom. Vince McMahon could not guarantee Sid the same money he was about to make in WCW, but he managed to sway Sid's decision by promising him a main event spot and also telling him that his WrestleMania payoffs, along with merchandise sales, would easily make up the money he was guaranteed in WCW. Sid signed with the WWF, but to this day he says this was a mistake. Sid was driven by money, not promises, but he had allowed Vince to talk him into signing with the WWF with no guarantees. Sid has since said that he made substantially less money in the WWF than what he would have if he signed with Dusty. It's probably a good time now to mention the Brian Pillman incident. Sid had signed his WWF contract, but he would still meet up with friends in WCW to catch up. Now, there are conflicting stories here about what happened, so you can do your own research and come to your own conclusions, but the most well-known story is that there was some bragging going on between Sid and the WCW boys. Stories say that Sid was running his mouth about how great things were in the WWF, while other stories say Brian Pillman was running his mouth and trying to provoke Sid. Sid got angry and said to Pillman, "Wait right there," and he went out to his car. The guys were worried that Sid was going to come back with a loaded weapon or some sort of blade, but Sid returned holding a squeegee. One account of the story says that the rest of the boys laughed so hard that Sid took a red face and walked away. Sid himself has said that the first thing he saw when he went back to his car was the squeegee, so he grabbed it, not thinking about how silly it looked. Either way, there are different accounts of what happened, so do have a look online and come to your own conclusions. But it does sound funny, a big guy like Sid coming back to a fight with this kind of weapon. Back to Sid's career, and now he was renamed as Sid Justice in the WWF. I feel it was odd bringing Sid in as a babyface. To me the guy was a natural heel, but in saying that, it wouldn't be long until Sid was turned. He was brought in as the special referee for SummerSlam 91 in the tag main event, and he also helped Randy Savage and Elizabeth during their wedding reception. Not long after though, Sid injured his biceps in a match with Jake Roberts, and he was forced to miss the Survivor Series pay-per-view. Sid entered the Royal Rumble in 1992 and was one of the final 4 participants. This Royal Rumble was for the WWF Championship, so there was a lot at stake. Sid done well to eliminate both Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, but Ric Flair was able to eliminate Sid after the Hulkster held onto Sid's arm on the outside of the ring. Sid was angry when it was announced that Hogan would face Flair at WrestleMania 8, but he apologised to the Hulkster for this, and the two teamed up to face Undertaker and Flair on the February 8th edition of Saturday Night's Main Event. During the match, Sid refused to tag in and he walked away from the Hulkster, solidifying him as a heel. The Hogan vs Flair matches happening around house shows were not doing as well as WWE hoped, so it was decided that Randy Savage instead would get the shot at Flair's title at WrestleMania 8. Hogan was subsequently booked into a match with Sid Justice at WrestleMania. The Sid vs Hogan match at WrestleMania was a flop. Not only was the ending botched due to bad timing, the two men didn't gel well at all in the ring. Sid was unable to capture the WWF Championship, but this wasn't the biggest blow Sid had to his career around this time. Before WrestleMania 8, Sid failed a wellness test. He was allowed to do the Hogan match and also take part in the annual tour of Europe after WrestleMania, but Sid was told when he came back he had to serve his suspension. Sid instead decided to quit so he could go play softball. Sid was scheduled to enter into a feud with the Ultimate Warrior, but this didn't happen, and instead the WWF replaced Sid with Papa Shango in the feud. Sid would go back to WCW for a second stint with the company following his WWF departure in '92, but only lasted a handful of months before an incident took place with Arn Anderson in England, which led to his release. To start off his second run with WCW, Sid returned at Slamboree '93 and defeated Van Hammer. That same year, he teamed up with Big Van Vader to feud with Sting, and at Fall Brawl, Sid's team of himself, Vader and Harlem Heat took on Sting, Davey Boy Smith, Dustin Rhodes and the Shockmaster. At Halloween Havoc, Sid faced Sting in a rematch of the same pay-per-view 3 years prior, but was beaten via a roll-up. Sid and Arn Anderson had one of the most infamous fights in wrestling history, and it all started in a hotel bar in England. Obviously, in any fight there are multiple sides to the story, and really, this story has been told so many times that I feel I would be wasting time going over the events. In short, Arn and Sid had a fight which resulted in scissors being used. Sid was pierced 4 times and Arn had around 20 slices put into his body. No charges were pressed because WCW was in England, and a complaint would have resulted in the men having to stay in England for a further 90 days. WCW tried to pretend the incident didn't happen, but when a group of wrestlers threatened to walk out of the company due to Sid's actions, Sid was released from the company. The plan was for Sid to defeat Vader and win the WCW Heavyweight Championship at Starrcade '93, but Sid's departure removed him from this match and Ric Flair was put into the spot. Based on TV tapings that took place prior to his departure, Sid would have defeated Vader and become the new champion. In 1994, Sid made his way to the USWA to feud with his old rival Jerry Lawler. Sid captured the promotion's heavyweight title and continued to feud with Lawler during his time with the company. Vince McMahon did not like Sid on a personal level, but he knew Sid was an asset, especially in 1995, thanks to losing big names to WCW. Sid would make his return to the WWF that year and would go on to have his most successful run with the company. In part 2, we will look at Sid's return to the WWF along with Sid again going back to WCW in 1999.